lies in the Vaseline we are. Sometimes it blows my mind, but here we are. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Gen X Wasteland. Good to see everybody. And for those of you celebrating, I hope you're having a good holiday weekend. I hope you are staying out of trouble, haven't run into any cryptids or anything out there in the woods, but you never know. Or maybe you should have. I don't know. Maybe it's a good sign. UFOs and Bigfoots and all that are actually a move up in the way our culture is going. But as always, my name is Miguel Connor, a host of AM Byte, but also host of this podcast as well. And you just heard some music from our guest today, and she will also be discussing a book that I enjoyed that answered a lot of questions that I'd been wondering about. The book is Music and the Seven Hermetic Principles, and that is Sue Terry. Sue, thank you very much for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me, Miguel. It's great to meet you sort of in person, and Ray also.
It is too. It is too. Yes. For those of you that may be wondering, the co-host, Dr. Sherilyn Jones, is also under the weather. Ray is also under the weather too. Again, something in the air. But we have a son who I guess calls himself Manchild. What's going on, man?
That's a nickname that my dad gave me ever since I was a little boy. Because I looked like a little man in his 70s when I was 5 years old. Yeah.
Well, we've changed.
Is that how we should address you then?
I guess. I don't know. Address me how you want to address me as long.
Just don't call you late for dinner, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Well, awesome. Well, I'll say Ray Jr. will be taking care of the phones. Better put up the phones here. For those of you who are live, please give us a call if you have any questions for Sue or for myself, or you just want to share your opinions on the holy mystical aspects of music and jazz. But before we do that, Sue, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be where you are now.
It's kind of a long story because I've been kicking around, the planet for a while now. But I was born in Massachusetts and raised in Connecticut. Basically, I ended up going to music school in in Hartford, and it's a pretty famous music school. It's called the Hart School, and I was just always interested in music. I've been playing music since I was 5 years old, and it was just kind of a natural path for me to continue that, go on to study formally. And I had the chance in my life to study and then to perform with the top artists in my field. And I felt like when I moved to New York, when I was 22, and I felt like I was living the dream, playing with these guys that I'd listened to on records my whole life. So now, I spent 30 years in New York. I toured all over the world. And now I'm in Ecuador. And now I'm teaching the musicians here who don't have exposure to the same lineage that I had. So, and my lineage is kind of like the tail end of this real authenticity, people that played with Charlie Parker and John Coltrane and that kind of thing. Right. So, my generation is kind of the last of that. The subsequent generations, they learned in school. They didn't learn from studying and hanging out with the cats,
Right. How did you end up in Ecuador?
I started coming here in 2009, and I really liked it. I was looking for a place to kind of get away from the snow because I'm from the Northeast. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend who was living here, and I used to talk to him about it. I came here, I started meeting musicians right away, great musicians who were here, mainly in Quito. And I loved it. and I eventually started coming a few months a year just for the winter. And then it just got longer and longer, and I started to not want to go back. So eventually I just moved here.
Awesome. And the music we just heard, Jazz de Barro. Tell us, that's your new album?
That's a new album with my Ecuadorian band here. And it was funny because these guys, the rhythm section and the pianist, the bassist and the percussionist, they were local musicians that I started mentoring when I first came here. And they formed a group. They've been friends since childhood and school and everything. And then eventually they asked me to join their group. And so I think they thought that they were the ones who were going to get the benefit of that. But I feel like it's me that got the benefit of it, because they are coming from a whole different perspective. It's extremely rhythmic. Our band is a combination. It's a fusion of Andean rhythms with jazz. So sometimes they'll be playing stuff and I'm like, what are you guys doing there?
Well, I'm glad it all worked out. Yes, somebody in the chat, be done with it. Cool, Sue. I studied a bit with Greg Hyslop. He played a bit with Gispel.
With Dizzy. Yeah, I've heard of Greg. I don't think I ever met him in person, but I have heard of him.
Good deal. Small world, but I guess big universe. So awesome. And you recently published the book, which again I enjoyed, Music and the 7 Hermetic Principles. How did please show us the book right there. For those of you watching on the video, there it is. In all its splendor. Have you always been into mysticism, or how did you run into that discipline?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I was kind of a natural mystic when I was a kid, when I was really young. And then my dad, when I was maybe 15 years old, gave me a copy of Carlos Castaneda's first book. And so that launched me on that sort of path of actually studying what metaphysics and mysticism was all about. And spirituality too, because it's all tied in together, right?
Definitely, for sure. Yeah, Castaneda. Wow, what an entry point.
Yeah, I know, right?
Amazing.
And my dad was a scientist. He was a chemist. So he was like a very, practical-minded person. But when he read this book, and I think he thought it was pretty amazing, and then he gave it to me. He said, "Here, read this."
Awesome. Yeah. I guess let's get to music, because I remember years ago, many moons ago, you're out there, I don't know, on the dance floor, or you're watching people shaking their bodies to these sound vibrations. You're listening to music, and I'm thinking, why? What's the point? Yes, sure, some animals do dance to it, but what exactly are we doing just shaking and enjoying this music? And later on, of course, I leaned into the basic Plato and Pythagoras, right? The universe is made of vibrations, and Plato would only let people in his academy. Two prerequisites was geometry and music. Before you went into philosophy, you had to master both. So the idea that there are vibrations coming from the higher places, and these vibrations make up the very universe. Music makes up the universe, if you would, and also allows us to experience higher worlds for inspiration, expanded consciousness, and healing. So am I being simplistic, or do you think that's a good answer? Is there something more scientific in your experience?
I think that everything that you're talking about is how we structure the universe, and we have to have structures, right? Because if we don't have structures, we can't access the dynamics that are in play between all these different forces that we're subjected to on the planet, right? So just like a building, an architectural building needs elements that support it, and contrary elements that push against each other, and then you have a design aspect on top of that. And this is what we deal with art. We're dealing with structure, but we're also dealing with the aesthetics of it, the design principles that are the same in any art, no matter what you call, no matter which art it is. And you still have you have color, and you have proportion, and you have texture, and you have the play of light and dark, you have space, you have negative space, right? So whatever art you're talking about, whether it's painting or dance or music or architecture or anything, literature, you still have these same design principles and these same structures. They're just called different things.
Agreed. Yeah, well said. And before we go esoteric, I like this question too. Somebody in the chat. Let me pull it up, because again, some people want just good advice on music, which I think is perfectly valid. Wise as serpent, the eyes see through you. How do you approach improvisation when blending traditional jazz with world music influences? And what advice would you give young musicians trying to find their own voice across genres?
You have to follow what you're interested in. I would say don't try to force something because you are looking to do something cool, but you don't feel really connected with it. You're just kind of synthetically or artificially putting things together. Go towards what you're drawn to, because that excitement is going to give you your path. That's going to show you what to do. And as far as improvisation with different, I've played so many different types of music, and I've been lucky to be able to play those styles with the authentic people that created and developed the styles. I played Puerto Rican music with, Ray Barreto and Tito Puente, and I played Cuban music with Juan Carlos Formel, so the Latin thing was always part of my background. So I naturally, gravitated to that. Then I had a period where I was playing with Haitian bands. So we used to tour in Port-au-Prince. We used to go all over the country, actually, when Baby Doc was in power, right? So, sometimes you're driving to the gig and, the Tonton Macoute, stop the van and make everybody get out, and they search you, and oh my God. So it was a pretty interesting time. But then again, that music was really different from the music that I had come up with. I didn't have any experience with it, so I had to learn about it, but I felt it. I had a natural feeling for it. And as I studied it and was more and more involved in it and started making arrangements for the albums and stuff, then I learned more about it, more how to utilize their musical concepts and incorporate them into what I wanted to do. So I would say also, if you have a chance to play with a band that plays a different style than you do, I played with rock bands, I played with blues bands, all of this. Do it, because that's how you're going to learn about the different styles, and you're going to be able eventually to have an overview that connects everything together, and you're going to realize nothing is actually separate.
Love it. Great advice. And I was going to bring this up later, but since we're talking about music and the nuances of it, 2 days ago on your Substack, and for the audience, follow her Substack. She's always got a lot of cool content, advice, blogs, everything. But you wrote in a note, one difference between jazz and classic music is that in jazz, we have this thing called ghost notes. These are, quote, implied notes which are expressed at a very low volume compared with the surrounding notes. Their pitch is definite, but they are muffled with either the tongue on a wind instrument or by touch, percussion, strings. Why are they important? Because the space they take up and the ghosted articulation are needed for the line to swing. Clifford Jordan once humorously said to me, If it wasn't for ghost notes, I never would have learned to play. So I love that. Tell us more about these ghost notes, because that's good advice if you're playing jazz, right?
Yeah, because I train a lot of classical musicians in improvisation too, right? So I have to get them to understand what they can already do when they want to approach playing jazz, because they're afraid. The classical musicians are afraid to improvise because that's not their background. You know, they have music, written music, and they follow that. And that's their training, and that's what they do every day. And so when you tell them, no, there's maybe a structure and some chords, but then within that, you have to create your own music, and they're afraid to do that. So I have to ease them into that by letting them know they already have all the tools to do it. And you can improvise with something as simple as a major scale. You know, you don't have to have a lot of knowledge to start improvising. You take what you know and you work with that. And then you get more comfortable. Even just playing random notes on your instrument, you know, beep, boop, beep, ba-da, beep-it-out, whatever. Because you'll find that if you're not used to doing that, you'll like hesitate, and you'll play something you didn't intend to play because you're flustered by not having that game plan already written out for you.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, it reminds me, I'm working on the David Bowie book now. And of course, David Bowie worked with Brian Eno, and he learned from William Burroughs that both believe in the cut-up technique, where you just throw everything together. You put everybody in a separate room, and you ask them strange questions to get their mood out, and then you throw them together. I mean, like Brian Eno would tell a musician, I'm not going to give you notes. I'm going to give the guitarist notes. I'm going to tell you, pretend you're in South Africa doing apartheid and you're writing a song that will get you thrown in jail. Stuff to get them out of their sort of comfort zone, because Brian Eno said, if you put 4 rock musicians in a room and you tell them to improvise, they all will go and start playing the blues because it's safe. They're like, oh, I'm going to innovate, and they'll just start playing the blues. You know, don't most people do that? We would just want to play it safe and not rock the boat, not get out of our comfort zone.
Brian Eno wrote that book, and they made an app out of it. Mm-hmm. What is the name of it? I can't remember.
Neither can I. I mean, he's always been so ahead of the curve when it comes to music. You know,
in the book, he has just a series of statements, and the statements are designed to take you out of your comfort zone and do something different than what you would normally do. You know, like he'll say something like, "What if you did it backwards?"
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And always trying to find something new. So, mm-hmm. And he got David Bowie to do the Berlin Trilogy, which is atmospheric, weird music, which his record company hated it, but Bowie was very happy with it. You know, it was healing for him. So,
yeah, we always have these conflicts with the record companies and the artists. You know, because the artist wants to evolve, but the record company doesn't want you to evolve. They want you to do the same thing that you made was a hit last time.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can't blame it. I mean, they're putting up all the money for advertising and all that, so they want to. Yeah, so it's.
Well, they sort of are because it comes out of your royalties.
That is true. Yeah, I guess I'm being kind. No, of course they're evil. I mean, they've been owned by the mob.
Yeah, don't cut them any slack there, Miguel. Come on.
Yeah, I was just trying to be nice, but even in my book, yes, it's always been that way. And for the old Saturn versus Hermes, right? There's the force that numbers, algorithms, you know, boundaries. And then there's Hermes trying to create Mercury in the alchemical lab. And so you have to get that right balance, because too much Hermes and then it's out of control and nothing ever gets done. You know, we're talking about people who don't understand time. artists and others. They don't understand responsibility. They don't understand anything. They're just out there creating.
And Joseph Campbell talked about that. He said that an artist is someone who's just going to follow this kind of obsession and not care about sleeping and not care about, going to a job or something like that. Sometimes it's hard to make your obsession go along with the daily rhythm of life that everyone else is following. I try, I do the best I can because I want to be a responsible person, right? A good householder in Buddhist terminology, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's hard. And he also gives the example when you're in love, you do anything for the person, even if it's the most impractical thing, because that you're just driven by that force.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, it comes down to if you don't show up at the studio on time and then your guitarist shows up at this time and you show up, then there ain't going to be any record. So it's the eternal force. And you deal with this in your book. Your book, tell us about the thesis of your book. It definitely is very inspired by the Cabalian, right? Which is an incredible, a perennial bestseller, still so popular in 2025. It's still up there with, The Alchemist, The Power of Now, Illusion. You know what I mean? It's one of those spiritual books that is just, it really struck, pardon the pun, a chord.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. I had my first copy in the early 80s. Someone gave it to me. I used to hang out at Weiser's bookstore, and I was friends with the guys that worked there, and so it's a book that's been in my library for many, many years, and it's a book that I'll go back to and look at, and sometimes just maybe open to a random page or a random chapter, to see, let me see if I can relate to this differently now that I'm older, I'm in a different phase of life. Let me go back to some timeless wisdom and see how I feel about it now and how does it affect me now. So one day I woke up last year with this idea that all of the principles in the Cabalian, all the Hermetic principles can be applied to music. And I thought, there should be a book on this. And I went to look for a book on it online, and there wasn't one. So I thought, well, I guess I have to write it then. That'll be my next book. And I did.
Yeah, you would think so, again, because, Hermeticism and these ancient traditions. I mean, the Cabalian obviously is modern, but I think it really taps into the wisdom of Hermes, no doubt. I think 2nd century Alexandrians would be very proud of this book. But I think...
And it's a compendium, right? Because if you were interviewing someone who is really gung-ho into the Hermetic philosophy, they would be like, oh no, the Cabalian, that's just bubble gum. You got to go to the Corpus Hermeticum, and you got to go to the Nag Hammadi library, and you got to go to the Emerald Tablet, and I did consult all of those things. But then at the end of the day, the Cabalian, it's a short volume, and it's approachable. And for our purposes, I mean, what are we doing? We're trying to apply these principles to music. So we don't have to go to the Corpus Hermeticum and the Emerald Tablet and all that to get the understanding of how the principles apply to music. We can just use the Cabalian, the principles that are given there. And then what I did in the book was I interwove a lot of my own experience, because I didn't want it to be a dry thing, like a dry philosophical thing. Mm-hmm. I wanted it to be something like, this is how I understand this principle and how I have seen it work in my music and in my life. So I tell a lot of stories in the book, which I think makes it more accessible for people to understand the theory of it.
Oh, agreed. And useful too. Again, especially when we're, the bridge towards music, towards the vibration, which is something everybody can relate to. So yeah, let's break down some of the ideas you have in your book. Obviously, one of the first principles of the book, which most people know, is mentalism. The all is mind. So how do we apply this to music or modern days?
So when you think about this idea, all is mind, that means that everything is formed as an idea before it can manifest physically. And you could even say the whole universe was an idea in the mind of God, right? So we have that. And when we play music, we have to know what we're going to play before we play it.
Right.
You can't come at music, and I don't care if it's written music or if it's something you've played 100 times or if it's something that you're going to improvise on. You still have to hear it in your head before you can play it. I mean, you can't even play in tune if you don't do that, so and think about, when I'm composing, I hear the composition. I'm not like fooling around on the piano or something and be like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Oh yeah, let me do this, let me do that. I hear what I want, and then I go to the piano after that. Mm-hmm. Think about Beethoven. Beethoven composed so many of his works when he was already completely deaf. The whole Ninth Symphony, he couldn't even hear it. But I talk about in the book how music is vibration, like you mentioned before, and so it's something that is felt. It's not only something that's going into the ear and through the skull. It's something you feel with your whole body, right? And that's how we have to tune up a lot of times, because the music is so loud on stage sometimes that you can't, if you're playing a flute or something, you can't even hear yourself. So how do you tune up even? You have to do it by the feeling of the frequency. And there's a deaf musician named Evelyn Glennie. I don't know if you've ever checked her out. She's amazing. She's a percussionist, but she doesn't only play drums. She plays tonal percussion instruments like vibraphone, marimba. And when she was little, she wanted to learn how to play music, and everybody, of course, said, no, you're deaf, how are you going to play music? But she had a teacher who was willing to spend the time to train her how to put her hand and feel the difference in frequency between each note. Wow. And that's how she plays. She plays barefoot so she can feel the vibrations. Helen Keller did the same thing. Right. I wrote a recent article on Substack about how deaf people hear music, because they do hear it, but they hear it in a different way. They experience it actually in almost a more holistic way, because they're feeling the music with their whole body. Mm-hmm. So, and anyway, getting back to mentalism, we have to connect to the universal mind when we're playing music. It can't only just be our own mind, but also the universal mind. And that's how you get into the zone, like they talk about in athletics. That's the same thing that we do.
Yeah, that no mind Satori sort of Zen state where you are one with everything and everything is just flowing. Yeah, great. Yeah, like you said, not even music. Some people do it jogging. Some people do it with golf. Yeah. Some people do it with meditation. It's many ways, many paths up the mountain, right?
Totally.
There's not one way to get in the zone. And So when you're playing, have you ever had anything close to a mystical experience, or is that something you've experienced in other times, or you just more
Yeah.
like your own?
Yeah. And that state is, it's a kind of addictive. It's like the drug, you know, you always want it. You keep wanting it because it's so incredible. And you don't usually get it. So that's the craft of what we do, is you know that state is possible. But in order to get to that state, you have to have a combination of conditions that are going to be conducive to it. You know, everybody in the band has to be knowing what they're supposed to be doing. You know, the sound man can't be screwing up over here. You know, there can't be, over at the bar, they can't be making pina coladas in the blender. You know, there can't be sirens outside. I mean, these are just like typical things that you have to deal with all the time, right? And so it's not that you have that experience every time you play, but you know that it's possible to have it. And so you keep training so that you can have it more often.
Makes sense. We have here a quick question. Nobody's calling in that I know, but has from Marcus Manstroma. Has Sue any thoughts on the music of Sun Ra?
I love Sun Ra. And I'll tell you a quick story. Actually, a couple quick stories. I went to see Sun Ra's band in Boston in, I think it might have been like 1979, somewhere, 78, 79. And he had two keyboards set up on the stage. One of the keyboards was a regular keyboard that played notes, but the other keyboard didn't play notes. It didn't have any sound coming out of it. It played colors.
Oh, wow. And
when he played that keyboard, there was a screen in back of the stage that played the colors and the formations that he was making on the keyboard. And I thought that was like one of the most innovative things I had ever seen. So then maybe a year or two later, he came to Hartford, and I had a radio program on WWUH, and I asked him if I could interview him on my show. So he came to the show, came to the studio. I asked him one question. He talked for an hour and a half.
Wow, easy job, right?
Easy interview. And then later, you know, when I lived in New York, I knew several of the musicians that used to play in his orchestra. You know, I knew Charles Davis. I worked with him. Pat Patrick was a friend of mine. So it was really cool to. I never ran into Sun Ra again, but it was cool to, you know, be around people that played with him and everything. And then Jackie McLean, who was my teacher, he told me a kind of a funny story. He said when he was really young, because he was playing with Miles when he was 17. Mm-hmm. And so all of the band leaders kind of had their eye on Jackie to maybe get him for their band, you know. And he said he ran into Sun Ra on the street, and Sun Ra asked him to join the band. But Jackie, I mean, he was young, you know. He said, I was afraid. He said, I ran away. Because Sun Ra was just a figure of unbelievable charisma and power, and someone very unusual. You didn't see people like him walking around every day. And you still don't.
You still don't. It's once in a lifetime, if that. Yeah. Wow. Well, people are making my job easier because we're getting some good questions here, Sue. I'll keep them coming because,
sure.
Again, pardon the pun, you've struck a chord. These are similar. wisest serpent, in your exploration of the Hermetic principles of mentalism, how do you see ancient figures like Dionysus, Pan, and the Bacchae representing the mind's relationship with music and altered states? And then a similar one, right? The same person. You think the gods of music and ecstasy reflect something essential about the role of the musician in channeling the unseen?
Yeah, totally. Because, I like to talk about what I do in music is I do a lot of improvisation. I'm a jazz musician, right? And when we improvise, we have to take something that's unknown and we have to bring it into the realm of the known. And that is basically what improvisation is all about. Because you know, we don't plan out our improvisations ahead of time. You know, we have a compendium, we have a toolbox, we have licks, and we have all of the technique and all of the knowledge that we have. But when we're improvising, I think I speak for most of my colleagues, we're not playing something that we already have planned out. We're reacting in the moment, using all of the tools that we have and all of the training that we've done to be able to respond like that to different cues that come from the piano and the bass and the drums and the people listening too, right? And so your technique is really just to free your own mind. So when we're going back to, let's go back to the Greek mysteries, right? Mm-hmm. Where gods like Dionysus and Pan are the gods of those type of ceremonies, because they are the ones who go to the unknown and bring it back to the known. And so in music, we're always dealing with this kind of thing. I mean, even if you're playing written music, even if you're a classical musician, we don't know, where does music come from? We don't even know where it comes from, right? It's like something from another dimension or something, you know?
Yeah, as you write, as above, so below. We know it's somewhere higher, right? And we're looking for that. That at the same time, speaking of Dionysus and all that, it seems that music is the one time today we're being possessed. It's good to be possessed. You feel you're being possessed by a force. Plato used to say that, yes, mysticism, there's always some sort of divine invasion. You know, you want your muse or Dionysus or Apollo to just come in and take over and, you know, instead of take the wheel, Jesus, take the wheel, Dionysus, right?
There you go.
So you must feel sometimes you're possessed.
That's part of being in the zone. Mm-hmm. You know, that's when you feel that the music is playing you, that you're not playing the music is playing you.
That's it. I think that's what we human. I mean, even in your book, you write and that's straight out of Hermeticism. We humans have a special place. We're not the gods. We're not animals or plants. We're not better or worse than any of these forms of consciousness, but we have a special place, and that's to bring these forces down to earth, right? To heal.
We have to realize what is our role here. Mm-hmm. You know, we are part of nature. We are part of the universe. We're not something separate, but we do have a role, just like in a family. Each person in the family has a role to play. And then you go out into the world and you have roles that you play depending on who you're interacting with. You know, maybe here I'm someone's teacher. Here I'm someone's sister. Mm-hmm. Here I'm someone's friend, you know. And we adjust our actions according to what role we have to play at any given time. We do the same thing in music.
No, makes perfect sense. And Well, what about you? Let's see. Nobody is calling right now, but what do you think, Ray Jr. Manchild? Do you have a question? Do you play music?
No, I don't play music, but
You don't play
all
music?
of those seem interesting.
Hmm?
I've been listening this whole time.
Everything good? All right, good.
Yeah.
Glad you found it interesting. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Does it, Ray? Does it make sense to you, like what we're talking about, or is it like weird?
No, it makes sense. All of it does.
Good.
Okay, good.
And us having our own roles in the universe and music. Where did it come from? That question.
Yeah, and why? Why do we shake our butts in the dance floor? So
Yeah, and music, a lot of times it's the only metaphysical experience someone is going to have in their life,
Yeah.
And that's why the volume keeps getting so higher and higher. And like if you go to a dance club, I mean, I wouldn't go to a dance club now, but back in the day, I went to a couple. I mean, it's so loud because they want the vibrations to go into the body. And again, that might be the only metaphysical experience someone has in their whole life is for those vibrations to enter their body. That's why a lot of times soldiers who are on the front lines and actively involved in a war setting, and they go back and they re-enlist because that was when they felt so alive being in that situation. Or people who do extreme sports like rock climbing and whitewater canoeing and whatever, which I've done those things too. It gives you a feeling of you absolutely have to have the utmost focus at that moment or you could die. So I think we're all looking for this kind of metaphysical reality because that's what enlivens us. That's what makes us feel that we're truly alive.
Yeah, I do have something I could add. Someone once told me that the basis of existence is sound. If we take out all of our senses, the first thing is sound. Everything starts with sound. So the whole universe was created from sound. Even if you, let's say, you scream down a big hallway, you can feel how big the hallway is because it has an echo, right?
Right.
In a way, sound has its own physical dimension to it.
Well, yeah, totally. I mean, in the Bible, the first thing was the word. Mm-hmm. And when they say word, they don't mean a word, they mean a sound.
Yep. And in Hinduism, with Om is the first action or sound in the universe. It creates everything.
Yeah, right. That's the only sounds that you can make if you take out your tongue. Try to make any sound, it makes oh. Yeah.
Interesting. Did not know that. Well, very cool. Very cool. Thanks for that, man.
Yeah, your tongue is just a combination of the Om sound. You're mixing it though. And making words out of it.
My friend tells me, she's a very spiritual person, and she tells me that Om is transforming. Mm-hmm. That we need to have a new sound now.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know.
No. I use it sometimes when I meditate. There's a few mantras I use. Depends.
Yeah. Oh.
So. Yeah, and mantras all are formed by receiving these vibrations and putting them into a verbal form, right? In Chinese, because I study Qigong and Tai Chi, I mean, for a long time also. So we have something called the Chinese healing sounds. And there's books about this and everything and recordings that you can listen to. But each organ has a certain vibration. And scientists have written about this as well. And what the Chinese healing sounds do is they characterize that vibration with a sound that you can make with your mouth and your vocal cords in the resonant cavity, and in order to heal the organ in question. And then, but then it goes also with the 5 phases. So it's not like, oh, there's something wrong with my liver, so I have to do the liver sound, because you have to go by the generative cycle, or it's a little bit complex. So it's not like a plug and play type thing. You have to research it. But the sounds are specifically designed to have a vibration that will match the process that you want to happen inside the body.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, plenty of people. There are many of these sort of sound modalities, and I think it's no surprise when we listen to music. If we're down, if we're sad, everything. It's therapeutic, and is also understanding, and it's empathic. I mean, as I write, the musicians are the shamans. They go into the spirit world. They bring back the medicine. They know what. Without knowing, they know what pain we are in the audience, and they're able to recognize it and almost heal it. And then, as you know, you're talking about the audience, you create this being called the egregore, this thought form where the audience creates an energy, and it can be very protective, very healing, and give people a sense of belonging and purpose. I mean, we see that in churches, sports events, but in a concert hall, it's just it's unmatched, isn't it, Sue? It's like nothing else, and
that's why that's why I enjoyed reading your book, Miguel, because you talked about Elvis in that setting that very few people have talked about his life that way, and most people don't even know anything about that aspect of him as a shaman and as a really spiritually focused person who just thought of his music as something that was supposed to be a healing force for people.
Yeah, so very true. Yeah, very true. It's all in the book. And even as people say, well, why was he playing these songs and those songs? He was always bringing the whole repertoire of American songs. He was America's shaman, right? That was his job. Never left the United States except when he left for the army, It's almost like it was his destiny. So he was playing bluegrass and country and blues and, all these types, because he wanted to give people what it is, the power of the American soul, if you would. That was his job. Shamans represent the tribe. That's their, that's what they do, and they do it well, and that's their responsibility. So Elvis ran the gamut. He talked about electricity. Have you read the book? Electricity is ever, and he could create electricity with the audience like nobody could. I mean, it was, for example, when he first started in Vegas, he'd wear those capes, and because of Captain Marvel, he had to stop, because even in the 70s, with women were already middle-aged, they were still grabbing him, and they almost killed him a few times. They were going to drag his ass into the audience. So he stopped wearing capes for his own safety.
Yeah, I had a martial artist friend who had dreadlocks, and he said he had to shave his head because his opponents would grab his dreads and pull him down. But what you're talking about, the artist as shaman, and this is what I talk about in my writings a lot, that we have to think really hard about what is our role as artists in society now. That's why I wrote the book. And that's why I keep writing, because I want to spread this idea that artists do have a role in society. And so we should not let our role be obscured by the industries that are trying to control us.
Yeah. Same old. Saturn is there. Because Saturn's job is to constrain and repackage, and calling it, like I know I did it, but calling it evil, no, that's his nature, just like the hawk's nature is to tear up the little bunny. It's the way the universe, and your book, of course, explains this is the structure of the divine mind. This is the structure of the universe. This is how we go through it, Feeling sorry for yourself or bitching is not going to solve anything, right? There are laws, there are polarities, and this is how we navigate them.
When I was a young musician coming up in New York, and sometimes the other women musicians would complain that they were being discriminated against, that they weren't getting jobs because they were chicks or whatever. And there's an aspect of that's true, that's still true today. But I was thinking, I'm living my dream. Mm-hmm. I'm playing with the musicians I always wanted to play with, and I'm being a jazz musician in New York, which is what I always wanted. Why would I be complaining? And so we're always going to be put into these social situations that are kind of skewed, right? Life is not fair. I learned that a while ago. Mm-hmm. So in an unfair world, how do you maintain an optimistic attitude and a positive attitude? Because you can go either way. It's like you're talking about, there's always the opposing forces. So you're going to go one way or you're going to go the other way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And of course, in in your book and the Cabalian, it talks about the idea of female and male forces. And that's always stumped a lot of people, because it already talks about polarities, but then they bring in the female male force. And again, it confuses people, but I like how you simply put it through Jungian lenses. There's an anima and an anima within us, outside of us. It's a force in the universe, right? And we just have to, know how to navigate it. As Jung said, there's an anima and anima within me, within you, and we have to figure out how much of those energies we're going to give, right?
It's interesting when you look at the principle of gender, which is one of the Hermetic principles, and you put it, you apply that to music, and of course there's always an interior aspect and an exterior aspect to everything as well. And so the exterior aspect is like, you have an idea, but that idea can't do anything unless it's expressed. So the idea is like a feminine energy, but then the expression of the idea is a masculine energy. Right. And you have to have both of them for things to come to fruition. It's the generative principle, the creative principle. You have to have those, the masculine and the feminine coming together to produce that third force.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like the whole Hindu or Gnostic myth. I think Hinduism, yes, you've got Shiva. He wants to know himself, but he can't know himself unless he has Prakriti or Shakti to receive and tell him who he is. And it's this same in Gnosticism. You've got this invisible spirit, but he can't do anything until the female principle tells him. He penetrates her, and then she shows back who you are, and then this creation flows out of it. So it's a beautiful metaphor, and and so appropriate for so many myths and arts and so forth. The other one too, which I liked, Sue, is you talk about the principle of rhythm and how it manifests in daily life and in the natural world. Can you tell us more about this?
So rhythm is a really strong controlling force, right? I mean, when you hear music, there's almost an automatic compulsion to move the body with the rhythm of the music, right? And it's like we were talking about dance clubs before, where the vibration enters your body and it controls you, it makes you move. So when we have this controlling force, which of course in music is a very structured thing, we have time signatures, which could be 4/4 or 6/8 or 3/4 or 7/8 or 5/4 or any number of structures. Then if you go to Indian music, that's even a whole other can of worms. And people wonder, like, how do they feel that? How do you feel 13? Yeah. How do you feel 15? And it's because their concept is different. They're dealing with a pulse that's of a longer duration than we are, right? Our pulse is kind of a shorter block that we divide into, basically 2, 3, or 4, or 5, or 7. So within that structure, when we are submitting to that structure and we're playing, that structure can take over. And we find that happening with tempos, because a tempo is theoretically supposed to stay the same throughout the song, right? I mean, or you might come to a part where there's an interlude or something like that. But basically a tempo stays for a certain amount of time, right? And you can even hear this on records. Tempos get slower and tempos get faster, because the rhythm takes you over and you start following you fall into the hypnotic aspect of the rhythm. And the tendency of slower tempos is to get slower, and the tendency of faster tempos is to get faster. So that shows you that the force is something really strong. And it's like gravity, right? Gravity is a strong force, but you can counteract it. You can jump up in the air. Oh, I just counteracted gravity, right? But only for a second. So we have these forces that want to control us, and we have to learn to guide within those forces. We have to guide things the way we want them to go.
Well said indeed. Yes. Anything else in the book you want to share that you want the audience to know? Again, for the audience, she just doesn't talk about Hermeticism. She goes into other topics, history, philosophy, all that. Like, there's certain startling parts, like you saying that the castrati only ended in the 18th century. I was like, holy mother of God. my jaw went to the ground, and like, that's kind of late to stop this barbarism. But
and think about the parents that took their sons to the back room in the barbershop, to get the operation, but it was too late. The castrati period was already ending,
Yeah. No, I guess they never heard of Michael Jackson, right?
Yeah, and look, that's another principle of gender that we can see happening, that the male voice is evolving now to encompass the female range, which is super interesting. That's entering that's now a very common form of modern pop music.
Right, of course. Yeah, and of course throughout history you had the Bee Gees and their falsetto, Mick Jagger, obviously, the whole, going back to Elvis, the whole androgyne look he started, and it has not ended in 50 or whatever, 70 years. It's the way to get the chicks, is to look, be more androgynous. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing the book. And should I show it again? Yeah, we have to do the marketing thing.
It's on the show notes, whether you're watching on video or the podcast. But yes, show us the book for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things I like about the book is that I was able to incorporate personal stories and stories that people told me into the book, because I think it makes it really accessible. Like one time Philip Glass was telling me, back in the day in New York, he was telling me that because people criticize his music and minimalist music because they say it's repetitive. And he said there's really no such thing as repetition, because every note that's played is influenced by the note that came before it. So if you had the same note, then it's influenced by that note. But then if you had the same note again before it and the same note again before it, every time that note is played, it's actually different because it's being influenced by that trajectory that it's on, you know. It's like breathing, you know, in meditation, they say every breath is unique. Good right point. And we know that from our own experience. We can't breathe exactly the same way every time we take a breath. There's always a change. And so Philip was saying there actually is no such thing as repetition. And if you start listening to the music with that idea in mind, you hear it in a totally different way.
No, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, there was a time, 90s, I was really into Philip Glass. And again, so I like, if you're meditating, you're chilling outdoors, that type of music is great, whether it's Eno's airport music or anything. You become one and it's wonderful. So yeah, I don't knock it. I don't knock it either. So awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. Great questions from the audience. Again, there will be a replay on all the usual podcast providers. For those of you in audience, Substack, I will include more of Sue's music at the end of the show, but definitely check it out. Again, it's on the links. And this is, it's been great. So first, I would like to say, Mr. Manchild or Ray Jr., thanks for keeping us company. We enjoyed your company on this journey.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks a lot, Miguel. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, we enjoyed it too. And for everybody else, have a good week, and we will talk soon.